Sometimes I subject myself to competitive video games that attract a younger demographic, like Valorant, and a few weeks ago, I got destroyed by some kids for how old I was. I don't remember how the conversation got to this point, but I eventually said something like, I graduated high school in 2015. And after that, everyone on my team started referring to me as Unc. Unc? Really, man? I was born in 1997. I'm only 28 years old. I'm still considered Gen Z. They quizzed me on new internet acronyms like SYBAU, which stands for Shut Your Ass Up, and were shocked that I was able to guess right. I'd have to assume that younger generations have always thought people in their late 20s are way older than they actually are, but it feels like Gen Z, maybe more than previous generations, see aging and getting old as a thing to be avoided at all costs. And ironically enough, sentiments are being shared online about Gen Z looking much older than millennials.
I'm 25. I'm not even gonna pretend like I look like what a 25-year-old should look like.
I don't like to just assume that the general opinion is fact because a few popular media outlets reported on it and then a bunch of creators decided to make videos for higher engagement, kind of like me. So why don't we actually see what's going on with ageism and aging in Gen Z? How beauty standards have shifted, how technology and science created new possibilities and unrealistic expectations for immortality, and why some Gen Z might feel immense pressure to rack up millions before they reach 18. Can we all agree that beauty standards are absolutely cooked? Dudes will see a picture of Ice Spice without makeup, then call her chopped with a dead rose emoji, not realizing they just exposed themselves as never having stayed the night with a woman before. I'm not saying you have to find every celebrity attractive, but if you're a guy and every picture you see of a woman without makeup leaves you repulsed, you've either let social media completely warp your standards, or you might just like men. Sorry to break that to you. What we frequently choose to consume through our eyes and ears drastically affects how we perceive the world and establishes a baseline level of expectations for each of those things. If you grow up in a culture where people say hi to you as you walk by them, it will feel weird when someone doesn't. If you get most of your dopamine from highly stimulating sources, any slow, monotonous task is going to feel painful. And if you spend most of your time engaging with humans on Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok, where people post how they look 1% of the time, often with filters and touch-ups included, anytime you aren't on those platforms, average or even objectively very attractive people are just going to look okay to you. No other generation has dealt with this at the scale at which it is present today. The pillars of beauty, influencers and celebrities spamming Botox and other injections, are quietly deciding that this is what young people should aspire to look like. And as a result, these treatments have become socially acceptable for people who aren't even old enough to get a tattoo. This is a big reason we are seeing the sentiment shared that Gen Z is not aging well, especially in regards to women. There are countless examples of women in their late teens and early 20s getting Botox and lip filler to enhance their appearance, either too young to understand the consequences or too young to care. Botox comes with a host of side effects, including vision problems, muscle weakness, and even drooping eyelids for weeks after injection. And the thing about these treatments is they don't even necessarily give you the beauty you were striving for. They just make you look older than you actually are. The pressure to look both youthful but mature enough to have a sophisticated look instead of a childish look is certainly something young people feel now more than ever, and it's even spread to guys too in the form of looks maxing. We got this clavicular guy I brought up a couple videos ago promoting Botox, injecting testosterone, and bone smashing to improve your jawline. Not familiar with bone smashing, you say? This is a pseudoscientific protocol in which one repeatedly hits their cheekbones with a hard object to create microfractures that are supposed to help them grow back bigger. And that's another thing indicative of youth that the youth clearly wants to get rid of: chubby cheeks. When we're young, fat in the face is evenly distributed, but it has pockets that plump up in places like the forehead and the cheeks. But what's a beauty standard that's considered highly aspirational now? Hollow cheeks. So we have teenagers who watch videos like this, a video that's already gotten 1 million views in 3 weeks, doing gua sha, 1 million different facial treatments, and maybe even Ozempic just to reach a face that was normally reserved for old people. Having more fat in your face actually fills out wrinkles and fine lines, making them less noticeable and making you look younger. So the sad irony is that in the process of pursuing eternal youth, Gen Z ends up looking older than if they were just to let their bodies naturally age, further contributing to their body image issues. Another factor that might play a role in this idea of aging being bad is, weirdly, how much emphasis we're placing on biohacking and optimization. One person leading this cause I want to talk about is Brian Johnson. Now, I think Brian's a great guy, and he's promoted some amazing protocols to help people live healthier, happier lives. But what I don't necessarily agree with him on is the way that he talks about immortality.
Let me ask you this with that. Do you actually think it might be that you won't die at all? Or just, you're looking to extend your lifestyle or lifetime beyond what now we consider possible?
I think it's legitimately the first time any human in history could say with a straight face, we may be the first generation to not die.
How does that statement make you feel? I don't know about you, but the idea of living forever just sucks. Unless you absolutely hate the idea of getting old and you have an intense fear of it, I can't see why you would want to extend your lifespan indefinitely. What I'm picturing right now is like an extremely senile guy in a robo suit. He's just like drooling at the lips and half of his brain is just like digitized at this point to keep him alive. And this is a huge problem I have with the longevity industry. A lot of the time, it's not focused on treating aging with acceptance and grace, but rather something to be avoided at all costs, which can create a culture of people who see getting old as taboo to talk about and confront. But it's not just the beauty standards and technology that can push people to transform their bodies and faces and take a stack of 40 different pills just to deny the reality of life. Some would also argue that it's the stress and other health issues too. One of those is sitting at your desk for 8 hours a day. If there is one area I think someone should optimize in their life, it is the ergonomics of their desk if you're spending like 8 hours a day there. How we sit undoubtedly plays a role in the pains we will feel in our body later on in life, and without it, you're prone to muscular imbalances and poor blood circulation. So that's why I want to talk about today's sponsor, what I'm sitting on right now, the Hbada X7. It is not an exaggeration to say that this chair is the most insane feature-packed chair I've ever sat in. Firstly, it has an auto-adjusting lumbar support. Hbada is the first brand in the world to integrate AI technology into ergonomic chairs. Built-in pressure sensors in the lumbar wings and seat sides detect your sitting and leaning pressure and automatically adjust the lumbar support based on that pressure. Find that it's too sensitive? No problem, you can just use the attached remote control to lower the sensitivity. Another thing that's incredibly nice is what is also built into the lumbar, a wellness therapy system. Yes, this chair has a massage function and heating function. The heads of the massager automatically extend during the massage, which features 3 ranges of intensity, then retract back when you're finished. Not enough? Well, while you're getting a massage, you can get heat pushed into your lower back using their red light system to make it even more relaxing. More than comfort, it's wellness. But maybe it's too hot for something like that at the moment. Good thing it has a cloud ventilation cushion with fans under the seat. Yep, while the swamp ass approaches, turn on the ventilation system and have their fans cool your bottom on those warm days. There's also a 4D dual-axis neck pillow. It's the most adjustable neck pillow out there, made to fit your height and posture perfectly. The 720-degree full-range robotic arms are the most adjustable armrests I've tried, designed to adapt to every scenario. If you've been noticing back pain or poorer posture or just fatigue from your current chair, the best thing you can do is invest in a nice chair like this one. You can find the link in the first line of my description below. Use the discount code COLE5 for an extra 5% off if you're interested. There's a consensus online that millennials were, on average, much more optimistic in a certain period of their youth than Gen Z is. This is portrayed in the many short-form clips I've been receiving on my feed about what millennial optimism looked like around 2014 to 2016. Even though millennials grew up in a time similar to the present, where America was still recovering from the housing crisis and college tuition was crazy, there was a general feeling that things were getting better and were going to continue to get better, especially in the dawn of the smartphone era. The culture of the internet and social media was fun and experimental, contributing to these feelings of lightheartedness and hope. Though I do think some of this is just a romanticization of the past. We tend to cling to things that remind us of our innocence through low-quality pictures and videos. But if we contrast that to today, it's hard to think about what that romanticization, what that era is going to look like for Gen Z. It'll probably still happen, but Gen Z are reporting the highest levels of anxiety and depression of any generation, which I do think plays a part in looking older than you actually are. I don't think it's an over-exaggeration to say that Gen Z is experiencing an unprecedented amount of bad news at an extremely unnatural frequency. I keep bringing up this article and study, and I'll probably bring it up again, but this National Geographic article about doom scrolling cites a study which shows that watching a traumatic event through social media for a few hours a day evokes the same symptoms of PTSD as the individuals who were actually at the event. In fact, the ones who watched the event repeatedly on their phones experienced more symptoms. You gotta understand that our brains contain these things called mirror neurons. These are cells that fire not only when we perform an action, but also when we watch someone else perform that same action. In a sense, the brain responds as if we're doing the thing ourselves. So when we watch a horrific incident unfold, our mirror neurons react as if we are at the incident, which causes that extreme distress you feel when you're looking at pixels on a screen that captured the incident. And then there's just everything else that they have to remove themselves from that has been psychologically engineered to keep you addicted and fatigued. Junk food, gambling being everywhere, bad news that makes the world seem worse than it is, but it also actually kind of is sometimes, bombarding their eyes with blue light instead of natural movement, these can all contribute to quicker aging. According to the CDC, from 2007 to 2013, just under 1/3 of teens reported getting at least 8 hours of sleep per night. In 2015, that number began to fall, and by 2019, only 22.1% of teens were meeting that threshold. These trends are inversely correlated with time spent on a computer and phone per day, which checks out based on what we know. Another study from 2025 wanted to measure the average number of hours slept per night among adolescents and how that affected their mental health. And they found that 16 to 18-year-olds on average report getting less than 6 hours of sleep per night, and that those who got less sleep on average reported much worse mental health outcomes. I think most of us know sleep is important, but I still think many of us vastly underestimate how important it is when it comes to long-term health. Gen Z are in the trenches of what I'd argue is the hardest psychological warfare any young generation has ever gone through, and that might start to reflect itself in their external appearance. But like a lot of this stuff, I don't want to definitively say that this is going to lead to Gen Z looking older, and I'll touch upon that a little bit more at the end of the video. Before I do that though, I want to address one final thing: the expectations that Gen Z hold for themselves and that older generations hold for them. Now, like I said previously, I think every young generation has a cohort of people who are scared of the idea of getting old, particularly when it comes to getting a job and having responsibilities, not just wrinkles. But there's also a sense that Gen Z aren't meeting the expectations of both their ancestors and what's being promoted on social media, causing more fear than necessary around growing old. For most of modern history, the expectations for what you should have accomplished by a certain age were pretty straightforward. People graduated high school, maybe went to college, got a job, got married, and bought a home. These milestones were treated as fixed checkboxes on a timeline that everyone was supposed to follow, and older generations still talk about them as if they're absolute truths rather than artifacts of a very specific economic window. But as most of us know, Gen Z inherited a very different reality. Wages stagnated while college tuition and housing prices skyrocketed. Entry-level jobs now demand 5 years of entry-level experience, and the idea of buying a home in your early 20s is so unrealistic that it's basically turned into a meme. But older people are telling them, when I was your age, I already had a house and 2 kids, and that gap between expectation and reality creates a ton of shame. Shame is one of the biggest drivers behind the fear of aging, because if you already feel behind at age 18, then every decade that precedes it is gonna feel like a deadline you're sprinting towards that you'll never be able to meet. And at the same time, Gen Z is bombarded with a completely different set of expectations that older generations didn't really have to deal with. The internet created an entirely new class of ultra-successful teenagers who earn more in a year than most people will see in a decade. The moment you open TikTok or YouTube, you're reminded that someone your age or younger has already made millions, or bought a penthouse, or founded a startup, or built an entire empire out of nothing but their charisma and an iPhone. And even if you logically know that these people represent a fraction of a percentage of the population, it's still gonna affect you because this is usually what's gonna be promoted the most on social media as well. So now you have two competing pressures suffocating the generation from both sides. You have older people who are telling them that they're not hitting their milestones fast enough, while they also have younger people online telling them that they aren't hitting their milestones fast enough. And that can make getting older feel feel terrifying. I get it, okay? Not being able to recover as quickly after binge drinking on the weekend, or getting strange pains in your back or shoulders, and not being at the level of success you thought you'd be at by this age is scary. But if you let that fear guide your decisions, you will only carry more regrets by the time you get to the age that can actually be considered old. Be honest with yourself. At the end of your life, do you think you're going to look back and say, man, I wish I would have delayed my aging through artificial means? Do you think you're going to say, I wish I would have started a crypto scam and lived in a penthouse in LA with people who are barely my friends? Or are you going to say, I wish I would have allowed myself to age gracefully and used the natural process of aging for growth? You see, aging and being old is not something to be afraid of. It is, as David Bowie put it, an extraordinary process where you become the person you always should have been. And if you impede upon that, either through endless facelifts, Botox, or ignoring responsibilities and burdens, you rob yourself of the unique development that is supposed to occur in every human. I'm not saying that all forms of delaying aging are inherently bad and that we shouldn't make strides to ensure that everyone feels healthier and is less prone to illness. What I am saying is that there will come a point where your body inevitably starts to give out. I'm 28 years old and I'm already experiencing a little bit of pain in my middle finger on my right hand from using my mouse too much. And I'll try to do what I can to stop that from happening or even reverse this pain. But I know there'll come a point where I can't use my hands in the way that maybe I could have when I was this age right now. And I've come to accept that. Why? Because at least I used these hands to create, to put myself through voluntary suffering and stress and push myself and carry burdens that ultimately led to me discovering who I was and what I'm capable of. Without taxing my body in that way, while of course taking care of it through proper recovery, I would not be nearly as confident, purposeful, and fulfilled and at peace as I am today. All wisdom accrued in society is the result of the people who decided to maturate and do the things that aged them. But you somehow think that scar on your hip, or that incoming wrinkle on your forehead, or that 18-year-old online who sells courses about how to sell courses is indicative that time is running out for you and it's just over. No, you don't have forever. Your body will start slowing down one day, but accepting that fact while working to minimize its impact is what makes you resilient, not denying it for as long as possible. You shouldn't be terrified of growing old. You should be terrified of remaining the same. And one more thing, because I said I was going to bring it up even though it destroys the dramatic ending here. I do think that Gen Z looking older is being a little bit blown out of proportion. Yes, I think what I brought up about the fear of aging and all these treatments being unnecessary is valid, but when I look at the majority of Gen Zers in real life that I engage with, all of them pretty much look their age. Don't let these media outlets, which highlight the more extreme cases of body dysmorphia and looks-maxing beauty, distort your perception of everyone who doesn't do all of these things, which is still the majority of Gen Z. Just do what you can to prevent illnesses and injuries, stay away from the intense beauty treatments and hacks in general, and don't be afraid to age. Let me know your thoughts on all this in the comments. I would really like to hear more perspectives on this specific topic. And if you enjoyed this video, you might like my video on Gen Z and the dating crisis they're going through and how that's formed and what's the causes and what are the solutions to it as a married guy that I am. So yeah, you can check that out right here. And now I'm gonna go. Goodbye.